Yeah, welcome back, guys. Where we left off, which was we were done updating and setting our state, but now we want to do something more advanced. We want to get data from an API and store it in our Redux store. So basically, we want to make an asynchronous API request. And in order to do that through Redux, we would need to use a middleware called thunk. So basically, a middleware is a function that is able to intercept before actions can reach the reducer. So it'll wait. And so that's all powered by the asynchronous. So what we want to do is we want to apply the thunk that we get from Redux thunk and apply it to our middleware. What it allows us to write functions in our action creators. Because before, if you remember, that action creators are just functions that return an action, which an action is just a plain object. So thunk is allowing us to write functions instead of actions in our action creators. Because the whole reason why we're doing this is because thunk gives us access to dispatch and get state in our action creators. Because basically, what thunk does is it's saying that if action equals a function instead of an object, then it will give us dispatch. It will give us get state from our store. So that gives us the ability to dispatch actions in our action creator. And the reason why we would want to do that is because when we're fetching for data, we go through three actions, which is a loading action. We dispatch a loading action, right? When you get data, you want a loading spinner to show. And so when we get that data, that'll be our second action. Then we'll show the data that we fetched. But if the data doesn't show, we'll dispatch a third action, which is an error. And this only works if it's all together in our action creator. So that's what's great about the middleware. So first what we need to do, which I've already done it, but you will need to install Redux thunk. So right here, just do npm install Redux thunk. Another thing we can install, which is very helpful, is called Redux logger. So I would npm install Redux logger because it's a very helpful tool. It's another middleware, but this what Redux logger does, it shows in our console log the actions firing off. So it's really helpful that just to help us on what's going on. What was our action? It shows our previous action, our initial state, or whatever the state was, and then it fires the action. It shows which action type, and after it shows what the state has now changed to. So once you install that, after you do that, go to your store. Here is where we'll set up our middleware. So what Redux gives us to enable us to add middlewares is a function called apply middlewares. This is from Redux. Actually, I already have it up here. And it's actually apply middleware. So it's called apply middleware. So it will take, so we have our combined reducers. You just have to put a comma and then apply middleware. So now all we have to do is pass in thunk to our middleware. So we're going to add two things, thunk and Redux logger. So we call create logger from Redux logger. So add these two things into our middleware. Now we're going to be setting up our asynchronous API request. So let's go to our action types. This is how I like starting it out. I like starting it with action types. Basically describing, what do I want to do? Because I know that there's going to be 3 action types. So I'm going to call this first one fetch data. Now this one's not going to be related to Minecraft. I couldn't find a good API for that, but we're going to do basic old JSON placeholders. So let's copy this. Shift Alt down on the key. Make duplicates. I'm just going to change this. I just did a Control D on Windows to grab both of these. I'm going to change this to, this is going to sound odd, but whatever, success data. Then failed. Data. Now I would do this over on a different folder on a real project. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it in the same action file. So under this action creator, now remember we passed all these actions from action types. So that's where they're all stored. Now I'm just going to title this get data. Get data. We need to return a function instead of an object. So right now an action creator is a function. Now that's going to return another function. So this is where we'll have dispatch. Will we have access to dispatch? We'll be returning this function. So this is where we'll dispatch our first action. So for this action, all we're returning is a loading state. So actions dot fetch data. So now this is to visualize it in our reducer, our loading is going to be set to false in our initial state. But when this action dispatches, we are going to change our loading state to true. So, and then while this is loading, we're going to fetch. And we're going to use JSON placeholders. We're going to be fetching users. And I know, I swear every tutorial, they use JSON placeholders. So I know I'm being basic here and probably boring, but once we've fetched users, then we'll have a response. A response, we need to turn it to JSON data. Then when we have our JSON data, I'm just going to call this data. Feel free to name that JSON or whatever. I'm going to call it data. And this is where we're going to dispatch. So this means our dispatch is successful. So we'll say success data. So our data is successful, and then we're going to have a payload. So we're going to be returning that data. So we'll have an error too. So dot catch. Want to dispatch that as well. Nope. So of our type actions dot error failed, fetch failed data. Payload is going to be the error. Now once we've done that, now we have our 3 action types dispatching, but we need our reducer. And we need to add to this. Like I said before, I would create a whole new reducer, but for this, we're going to put it into the same one. So on fetch data, now we're going to add new state to this. We're going to add a loading to false. Error. Error is going to be null. There's no error. Then we're going to need, let's just call it items. Or actually, we're going to be fetching names. Right, so names are nothing. Because we haven't received any of them yet. Right now, they're just an empty array. Remember returning, we're spreading the state again. We're going to change, so fetch data, now we're loading is set to true. Loading is set to true. That is it for that. We're going to do success data. Yeah, these action types wording is whack, but success data, we got for this, our success data, our loading back to false. What is that? Loading is set back to false in our success data, so we're going to get our items. We're going to do that to action dot payload. So when the success data is true, our action dot payload is going to be that fetch data. Okay, so actions dot failed action dot payload. Or we could honestly just give this. I kind of just want to put a string and say error, put your own custom message, but I'm just going to stick to action dot payload. So our reducer's done. Now let's go to our Minecraft component. So here's a Minecraft component. And all right, here's our message dispatch the props. So now we're going to go ahead and grab our loading. So we're just going to do this all in the same Minecraft component. So we already have map state and dispatch set up. Just going to do it here. State dot diamond, because they're all in the same, they're in the same reducer. Diamond dot loading error dot diamond. And there's our items. I think it was called items. Names. Right. I knew that. Names. So I'm passing them into our component since we are destructuring them. Names. Loading. Error. Okay, good. Now I want to grab our action creator, which we just made. Get data. So we have our get data, and we need to pass this into our dispatch. Pass this into our component, get data. Cool. Now for our get data to work correctly, we're going to need to use, since we're using functional components, I'm going to use a hook called useEffect. So useEffect is definitely needed when you're having to make asynchronous requests. Just going to pass it in right here. So we're going to call useEffect. So useEffect will take a callback function. So it has two arguments. It'll be the callback function and then the second one, which will be its dependencies. And its dependency right here, the empty brackets, we're just going to leave it empty. So it is technically cheating, as Dan Abramov, the guy who made Redux, he said, that it's cheating. I mean, he's also the on the team for React, working on React. But he said that it's basically cheating, keeping an empty array bracket. So, because what it's really designed for is to, if any dependencies in our callback function have any state, we want to put it in here, such as names. So if that state changes, that value changes, then it will re-render the callback function. But for now, we're gonna leave it blank. So we're going to pass in our get data. So you see in class components, it would be handled differently, but for here, we're using useEffect. So once that is done, we'll have names. And I'm just going to pass it down here. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is, if loading is true, then we're going to just say, we're going to just have loading. Else, we want to have names dot. Actually, it would have been better to put name, but we're going to have to put name. Names dot map Let's see, we're going to put name. Yeah, now it's going to sound kind of confusing. Might as well put this as item. So we're going to have item dot name. Let's just put this in a p tag. Okay, now we're getting an error. We don't need these. So the names should be showing. I probably need to put a class name to show them num. So we put npm start. So they're not showing. Names. Oh. Okay, I see where I made the error. Wow, what is with me in items? It's names. So that was the problem. So names. Now that I switch to the names, it shows. All right, it totally messes up the images. But you see that the names show up now. And it needs a unique key prop. So when you use map, the array method, map, you need to pass in a key. So right here, so this is just a unique identifier for each item. Now, the best way to actually do this is like best practice is to have a unique ID for each object. Now, I don't know if JSON placeholders, they do ID. So each of these have their own unique ID. So you can just put item.id. Now there, the error should go away. Cool. So now that is the huge benefit of using Redux Thunk. Because if you look at our store, so say we want to remove thunk, we'll get an error. And it says actions must be plain objects. So our action we created right here, it is nothing like the one above, right? We have a function. And so that is a great benefit of thunk because it allows us to write functions and gives us the dispatch. It also gives us get state too. But we didn't need that for this one. So let's just go back to the store, pass thunk back in, and it brings us back. So that is a great benefit of thunk. So in the next video, I want to go over more of optimizing our Redux store for better performance. And I'm going to be going over reselect. So I will see you in the next video. See ya.